Happy Thursday. I hope you're all well today, despite our trip being cancelled. We can take some comfort in knowing that we get to spend extra hours together in the Bible. Someone said to me a few days ago that the clearest evidence that we were in the Sunday law was the fact that it just couldn't stop raining. So there's your latter rain. Let's open with a word of prayer. Dear God, we have been blessed with physical rain. And we recognize that that acts as a reminder that in the time period of the spiritual latter rain, it's our duty and responsibility to pray that we may get the blessing from it. And so I thank you for those constant reminders. I invite you and ask you to gather here with us today as we try to understand the end of the world better. I pray this prayer in Jesus' name. Amen. I spent near a month in South Africa recently. With Elder Shemin. And one thing we kept fighting over was the amount of flowers she decides to put in front of the presenters. And she promised me that when I teach, she'll find the biggest bouquet of flowers. So I submit. She wins that battle. So today's presentation wasn't scheduled, but I find it a blessing because I received the feedback that those 30 minutes we went on a Formula One tour on went by really quickly. So I hope to go through a bit of a summary of what I've discussed so far. And then hopefully launch into some thoughts and ideas that pertain to what we're discussing at this camp meeting. So the fundamental thing that I think myself and my peers are trying to do is to understand Revelation 17. And a key part of unlocking that chapter is ensuring that we have robust, defensible definitions for specific entities. Yep. In that chapter. So the three that we've started addressing is head, beast, and woman. So Aryan presented, I followed, and hopefully you caught the similar definitions. And when Elder Terry comes, hopefully a third perspective will make it clearer in all our minds why these definitions work and are necessary. So I don't know where the tech team are. They've disappeared. But I'd like to interact with you all a bit as we go through a summary of my studies thus far. So if there's a mic, I'll get my beautiful helper to come around. So if you remember what the definitions are for the head, could you put up your hand? No one remembers. No, not Justina. Okay, Caesar. Head.
Thank you. A woman
No,
is
head.
okay.
Head.
Head.
Yes.
I think that head was an entity, an organization, object, concept. No, a political institution without power.
So Caesar says a political institution with power.
Without.
Without power.
And the beast
Whoa,
was
whoa, 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 whoa. Does someone want to jump in? Yep.
From Aryan's presentation, I have a head is a political institution in a certain dispensation.
So I'm just going to add a little bit in there. So as you said, it's a political institution in a particular dispensation. You know that's the case because there's 7 of them. As you go through time, this thing changes. And it has to have power because it's what the woman wants. The woman has no power of her own. She wants to impact the waters. In that chapter, that's the symbol, which is the people. And she knows that she can't do that on her own. So she needs something to help her. So at this stage, she goes around and she can see a political institution with power. Definition of a beast.
Oh, yeah. Political institution with power that has adapted the ideology of the woman.
So we go from this head, that's just a political institution, and what becomes the key differential between the beast and the head? I heard someone shout out, it's the woman. Mark, what about the woman?
I wanted to answer your first question.
You've got the answer to my question baked into that.
All right, all right. I will try. I think the head and the beast are often similar, but at the sixth kingdom,
Nope.
you see that it's a big difference.
Stopping you there. Don't go to kingdoms yet. Just from the definition that you were going to tell me, what's the differential between the beast and the head? Someone said the woman, but what about the woman?
The woman rides the beast because it needs the beast.
Yep, so the woman rides it because she needs it, it has power. Someone, what does the woman have that that institution is going to take? People shouted ideology. Do you see that? Yep. So the woman has an ideology, and then she's going to look around because she wants the people to adopt that ideology, but she just can't get to them. So that political institution becomes necessary. She goes to that political institution with power, and that political institution then adopts her ideology. Of the woman. Is that fine? Okay. So we described a woman as an entity with an ideology. When we stress this idea of a political institution, you can see that it's different to just saying an entity. Hopefully by now, you know what an institution is. Who doesn't know what an institution is? Daniel and Parminder don't know what an institution is. So the rest of you do. So I'm going to ask one of you at random to tell me what an institution is. Emma, What's an institution?
It's a structured, enduring system that's more than buildings or organization. A set of established rules, norms, and roles.
You said rules, norms, and
Roles.
roles. So you're going to get these different rules and norms, and then you're going to codify them, going to package them into something that can just do that thing. Does that make sense? So to the people that say they don't know what an institution is, did Emma's definition help you? I need feedback, or else we're not going to go anywhere.
EMA definition includes something about a structure, some structures.
I don't know what that is. What's a structure? Before we get to your question, I want to know what a structure is. Is it related to this idea of structures?
All this, sorry, it's about all these definitions. Where they come from.
Okay, I'll answer this question about structures and then I'll come back to you. So, what I understand a structure to be is an arrangement or organization of specific parts that are going to be used to accomplish something. So there's rules or norms that come together to accomplish a function. So Laura asked the question, these definitions, where did they even come from? So if I were to ask you the question, when you read these three things in that chapter, do you have an idea of what that thing is? How would you define it? Laura. Pick any one and then just give me an idea of how you would define it.
Well, I don't know. I need to think about it. Well, I like those definitions, but I just want to know where you get it from.
So
It seems to me it's just logical and it's okay, but I want to know where.
So in Tuesday's class, I tried tracing the symbol of head in Revelation 17. So I'll start with that one because for me that's the easiest one. In that chapter it tells you the head are mountains, which are kings. So a head is a mountain, is a king. So you look in the Greek definition of what king is, the word that's given for king, and Strong's traces it to this idea of the foundation of power, i.e., the root of where all power comes from. So we can go to Daniel, because Daniel and Revelation are one book, to see how Daniel is going to use this term. When Daniel refers to king, he's going to say, these kingdoms that I've shown you are kings. And you know that there's not one king that represents that kingdom. There's something else that has power in and of itself that is going to use that kingdom. So you look around and you find, what is it that's going to control this kingdom? You look around to see what's going to control that kingdom, to act as the foundation of power. So you, as a student, you hypothesize. What is going to work? So you've been learning about institutions, and you see that institutions are codified rules, norms that govern behavior. That govern behavior. A key part that was missing from Emma's definition is that these institutions shape society. They shape the culture. They're what are in control. They have power to do that. So you have this idea, institution, and you stress test it. You check it to see if it makes sense in one place and then another place. And what you find is that it can't be any old institution. Because an example of an institution is a library. So you'd ask yourself, is that what the woman wants? Does she just want any old institution? And you get to the point, because it's a king, which is a kingdom, that it's involved with policies. Policies. Oh, okay. Which is essentially politics. So it has to be a political institution with power. with head, does that help, Lara? How I would go about trying to find a reasonable definition? Okay, I saw a thumbs up for everyone else. So you do the same process for each of the other terms. And one of the criteria that we needed was that it's vague but specific. So someone asked me to clarify what that means. If you recall, we have 7 dispensations. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 7 dispensations. So when you want a definition, you want something that could be applied in each of these 7 dispensations. That's vague. But you want something specific so that when you open up one of these dispensations and you look at it, you can see what you're looking for. Because if it's too vague, you won't know what to look for. So it has to be specific enough to find something. So woman, when I say it's an entity with an ideology, the question will come to your mind, why isn't that a political institution with an ideology? So you go to each of those dispensations and you stress test it. To see if you can always see a political institution with an ideology. And you'd be hard pressed to do that. It would be tough to do that. Because sometimes it's not an institution. Sometimes it's just an entity. An entity is your umbrella term. When we define what entity is, it's something recognizable that can act. And so for me, entity works. So are we okay with the definitions? Mark.
Can you give us an example where we don't see it?
I don't like going to examples. So let's go to an example you're all familiar with of an institution, where it's an institution. Where's the woman an institution? In which one of these dispensations? Mark.
The Roman Catholic Church?
I'm going to say the papacy. They're 2 very specific different things. So the papacy is that institution. So now you're going to go to 1, 2, 3, 4 and ask yourself, what's the woman there? And then you're going to need to prove that it's an institution in each one of those cases. And at least I couldn't do that. I see the woman here in number 3 as Alexander the Great. Because Alexander the Great has an ideology that he wants to rule the world. And that's different from an institution. That's just an entity. Is that clear? You asked for an example, and I'm only going to give you one. So we started with our definitions. And I'm stressing the point that what makes the distinction between beast and head is what? Blessing.
The relationship with the woman.
The relationship with the woman, and that relationship is within the confines of what? I'm just going to tell you. The ideology. So it's not until that ideology is in the picture that you have that distinction between a head and a beast. That's where that relationship is. So after going through all of that and the definitions that we have, we said, okay, I know all that, so what? I was told growing up that the Sunday law, that waymark, is when a law is passed about Sunday. And then I joined this movement, and someone told me that the great test was equality. So I went to my notes, and I said, okay, if it's not Sunday, then it's equality. So I should be looking for a law about equality. And then all these teachers stood up and said, nope, you're wrong again. Because the marker for this thing that you've been waiting for your whole life is now going to be an election. How did we get there? So myself and my peers brainstormed, which were baked into our studies already. We've just decided to package it into some proofs. So just a review of the proofs that I gave. Proof number 1. The rise and fall of kingdoms. All roads lead to Revelation 17. Because that's the chapter where you're going to learn about the end of the world. So in that chapter, you see 7 kingdoms. And there's a power struggle that's going on. And you want to know when the 7th kingdom comes to power. How are you going to do that? How is it going to accomplish that work? So you go to something that you're familiar with, a methodology you should all know how to use, which is juxtapositioning. So you explore the 6th kingdom. And what you see when you look closely enough at the 6th kingdom is that its defining characteristic we'll just call it democracy. It's representation, that what makes it unique, a government through representation. That's what Ellen White is referring to when she says this lamb coming up out of the earth it's growing in power. As it pieces together its constitution as the thing that gives it its power. And the key highlighted text in that constitution is that if anyone wants to rule this country, the channel that they need to go through is an election. So that's what coming up out of the earth means. So it lives by democracy and it dies by democracy. Like the 5th kingdom, which lived by the sword and died by the sword. In chapter 13, verse 11, you see that there's 2 kingdoms. One's called the lamb, and one's called the dragon. And where are they both coming up out of? They're both coming up out of the earth. So, if coming up out of the earth means coming to power through democracy, that means the 7th kingdom is going to come to power through the democratic tool. Hence why this marker that we have here is an election. Because that's where we anticipate the 7th kingdom coming to power. The second proof, we started exploring. I have to check my notes, because even I forgot. Was related to the agitation of the Sunday law. A component of the agitation, when you use that structure given in Isaiah 46, is that when you're in the present, when you're living through some significant thing you can see in front of you, You can look at the past, look for an event where you see the theme that you're looking for, power struggle, and you can get a sense of what that power struggle is based upon. So you know, standing in 2021, in January 6th, that there's a power struggle going on. Not you in your home are the only one that sees that. The whole world can see it. It's obvious. It's clear as day. And what you take away from that, what you learn from that, is that if you want power, what do you need to go through? An election. That election is going to give you your power. So the next time you see a power struggle and expect that seventh kingdom to rise up, you know that if it wants power, if it's going to come to power, let me put it that way, it's going to have to go through the channels of an election. And then the last one, which is where we rushed a little bit, was Julius Caesar. Julius Caesar is no insignificant figure. In the book of Daniel, when you read about that fourth kingdom, you should know that that kingdom was once a republic. It was once a lamb. And then someone comes along, or something, an entity, and gives that political institution their ideology and turns it into a beast. The word empire. So it goes from a republic to an empire. So the one to do that work is Julius Caesar. So let's explore Julius Caesar's rise to power. And what we get when we use structures, sequence and structure are interchangeable. We look in Daniel 11 and we see this sequence between the king of the north and the king of the south. The story of Raphi and Panium. Hopefully we should all be familiar with that. And then in verse 16, after all that back and forth, Rome comes on the scene, and Pompey is going to go into the glorious land. This becomes your hook. Because you know, from the time of the End magazine, that when the king of the north, or Rome, enters into the glorious land, you're at the time of the end. You're at the Sunday law, sorry. verse 41. So you bring these two lines line upon line, and you say, I want to learn something. Pompey gives you a perspective, but in 63 BC, Julius Caesar is going to give you another perspective of this waymark. Remember, we're tracking his rise to power. He was this charismatic fellow who wants to rise to the top. And he knows that there's two important positions that he needs to hold. And so he does an election campaign in the year 63 BC. Remember, with sequences and structures, you're constantly looking for hooks, connecting links between the lines you're joining together. So for verse 16 and verse 41, the hook was Rome going into the glorious land. The next hook you're going to use is the year 63 BC. And now you're going to explore that. And you see that Julius Caesar wins an election for Pontifex Maximus. What does the Pontifex Maximus do in Rome? Anyone? I said it then, and I've said it for 8 months. Without even knowing anything about Julius Caesar, you should already know. Because of the papacy. So someone says in the front, he becomes the leader of the church. But it's not just the church. It's the head of all churches. And the churches in your kingdom are going to shape the ideology of the subjects. What they believe. It's all about ideology. That's why it was so important for Julius Caesar to become Pontifex Maximus. And the way he achieves that is through an election. I saw a hand over there. Pedro.
Was he the woman before he became Pontifex Maximus?
I'm not going to answer that right now. Perhaps it's something we can do in the Q&A later. Okay, if that's okay with you. So now you have this story of someone rising to power at the marker for the Sunday law and the means or the vehicle that he's going to do that with is through an election. The context is elections and ideology. What's our next step? What can we do with that information? I've given you a symbol. What now? So someone says you have to make an application to the present. But because I just love exploring symbols so much, I'm going to leave the present aside. And then I'm going to try and see who else became the head of all churches. Because then I can create another line and just continue on with this line upon line. So we know in 538, or at least in 533, someone says to the papacy, I'm going to make you something. The head of all churches. But that doesn't take effect until 538. Which I'm hoping you're all comfortable with marking as a Sunday law in that history. That's where you get the terminology pontiff from. When the Pope refers to themselves as pontiff, it all has its roots in Pontifex Maximus. So in 538, when the papacy is the head of all churches, again, I ask you, what is the thing that's being highlighted? An ideology. It's ideological. Because the papacy knows, that woman knows, that the thing that is most important is ideology. We can do this over and over and over again. Let's go to another example. We'll go to our favorite structure. 1, 2, 3. I'm studying Revelation 17. But before I do that, Caesar has a question.
A comment about that. I think, if I'm not wrong, that Napoleon did the same thing in 1798. Oh, he became an emperor and also the head of all churches, I think.
I-
If I'm not wrong.
So, what I understand Caesar is saying is at the beginning and the end of the papacy, the thing that marks its rise and its fall is based on ideology. Because Napoleon is fed up with this ideology, and so they do something in 1798 without unpackaging everything he said. So, Revelation 17. It's the end of the world. So, I go to Revelation 17 to know what's going to happen. I want to understand this way, Mark, Sunday law. And at the beginning of the chapter, John is going to do something so clever. He's going to prime your mind. And who does he use to prime your mind? Which kingdom? Someone asked me what to prime is. It means to prepare. To prepare your mind, because now they're going to explore something. So someone said the papacy. You read about Mystery Babylon, which I hope you're comfortable with seeing as being in the 5th dispensation. But you still a bit lost. So where do you go? If you're learning about spiritual Babylon, you're going to go to literal, natural Babylon. So you go all the way back in time, and you're going to learn about literal Babylon. So what we want to take from that is how this entity enters into the glorious land. What does that even mean? What does that signify for us? So where do I find that story? Of literal Babylon, the king of the north, entering into the glorious land. In the book of Daniel. Someone else that's not Caesar. Justina, shout out. So Justina's taken us to Daniel chapter 1, verse 1 and 2. Nebuchadnezzar. Babylon has been involved with this war with Assyria and Egypt. And then they've come to a point where they set their eyes on something. A kingdom. And that kingdom is the glorious land. But what does he do when he goes to the glorious land? I'll read the verses. I'll read them in full and then you can read them. In the 3rd year of the reign of Jehoiakim, the king of Judah, Nebuchadnezzar, the king of Babylon, is going to come to Jerusalem and besiege it. And when that happens, the Lord is going to give Jehoiakim into Nebuchadnezzar's hand with part of the vessels of the house of God, which he carried into the land of Babylon to the house of Nebuchadnezzar's God. And he brought the vessels into the treasure house of his God. So what was important at this stage when Nebuchadnezzar entered into the glorious land? What does he take? Oh, sorry. Read the verse. My bad. So after reading the verse, I asked the question, when the king of the north goes into the glorious land, What is the prize jewel? What is important? What's being marked there? The vessels of the temple. So the sanctuary is going to get raided. So the king of the north can control that sanctuary. He's going to take their vessels, put them in his sanctuary, so that he can control their sanctuary. And the sanctuary is the bedrock of what? Of Israel. Yeah, worship. Religion. What else? I need other words until I get the word I want. Culture. And ideology. All of these shape the ideology of the nation. So I know that in verse 41, the marker for the Sunday law, as we've gone through example after example, is ideological. That's what we're looking for, which is very different from something physical. And hopefully, as the rest of the week goes on, when we start unpackaging what that fornication is in Revelation 17, we'll know what to look for. So I hope that you kept up with the month in South Africa, because that adultery question is going to become important. How you understand a relationship and adultery. Let's close in a word of prayer. Dear God, I come before you grateful for the repeating histories that we have, that we can use as patterns to identify something that we should learn. And I pray that your spirit may be with us through the rest of the camp. In Jesus' name I pray, amen.